Why does it matter to us? Well, it matters because war is bad. And an unjust war, a war, if anything, on the wrong side, is even worse. Britain has been involved, as you know, in far too many wars that have nothing to do with us. Iraq was a total disaster. Afghanistan, 8 years we've been there. Billions and billions and billions of pounds which should have been spent on the health service, on education, on re-equipping British industry, thrown down the drain. So now we're talking to the Taliban, and when we leave next year, that country will be handed back to those people. A total disaster which the British people never wanted. So wars like that, they are innately bad, and as you know, this party has always stood against those wars. We're involved in a global struggle, so what happens in a country a long way away affects all of us, and what happens in a nationalist country, which is what Syria is, affects every other nationalist on the planet, because we have a global enemy and it's a global struggle. So they came up with a ridiculous lie that the Syrians had used chemical weapons on their own people in the very same week that a United Nations chemical inspections team entered Syria at the request of the Syrian government. Utter nonsense, the idea that that was them. And since then, we've had the facts, the clear facts, that the rebels have been filmed with chemical weapons. They've been caught in Turkey and Iraq with chemical weapons. They've boasted about using the chemical weapons. So it was to be a war on totally false pretences. I've met captive rebels, and those rebels are not secular, moderate, liberal nationalists like us. They're Islamist fanatics who say quite openly, when we destroyed democratic secular Syria, when we purged and killed all the Christians, all the Jews, all the Shia, all the moderate Sunni, then we're coming to attack Europe and the United States. They're quite open about it. The difference would have been, if that war had gone ahead, that in some months' time, instead of an attack in Westgate in Kenya involving machine guns and hand grenades, it would have involved sarin nerve gas, because that's what they would have got if David Cameron had handed them control of that poor country. The Arab way when you're in a confrontation tends to be, you have a go at us and we'll rip your head off. That kind of defiance. There's no point trying to defy a state which is far stronger than you when you're trying to persuade the legislators of that state that actually there's a peaceful route. If you they're entitled to wave the sabre of war, considering Cameron's there rattling a huge sabre marked cruise missiles, 200 of the damn things, but it wouldn't have helped. And this letter was different. It said, we invite you as fellow parliamentarians to come to our country, either en masse or by sending a delegation, at the earliest time convenient to you. So it's saying, you don't have to bomb us, you know. Why don't you come and look and talk about it? For starters, it said, we suggest it might be particularly appropriate for such a visit to coincide with the conclusion of the current United Nations investigation into the chemical attack, which we condemn without reservation. So they hadn't said that before. They said it wasn't us. They hadn't said, we condemn this without reservation. Not in English. They said it in their own language, but not in the English language. And they finally said, we invite you to bring your own experts with you to check for yourselves the UN's conclusions. So for anyone with a doubt, there we are, it's given them the chance. Let's give these people the benefit of the doubt. It's a good way of assuaging my doubt. So that was the letter. As I say, according to the BBC, it had a very significant effect on a number of MPs. So it stopped £250 million in British taxpayers' money being blown in the first 12 hours. That would have been the cost of the first strike. In 1 week, Cameron and his fellow war criminals would have blown £500 million. That letter, which changed history, I wrote. Don't get me wrong, that letter that stopped the war in its tracks, yes, I wrote it, but everything in it came from the Syrians. The initial idea came from them. They asked for help. The offers in it were all discussed with them and approved by them. Every word was gone through with a Syrian who spoke very, very good English, but still couldn't have written it because he couldn't put himself in the head of a British MP in the way that I can put myself in the head of a British MP. Tell you what, some things you see in that head aren't nice, but still, you can put yourself in the head. I can because, as I say, I've grown up with them and I sit with their kind in the European Parliament because I was made an MEP by the efforts of people like you and by the voters of Blackpool and further abroad in the northwest of England. So the Syrians approved that letter. They came up with the offers. They were happy with the contents and we worked on it together. The BBC referred to it as a remarkable document. Sky, I think, said we just read this and it's fascinating. One of them said, an observer said, I'm experienced in these things. I can tell you that a letter like this wouldn't have come from Syria without being approved absolutely at the very top. This really is serious. One of the experts that they brought in, I think it was the BBC, said, well, really, we don't understand this. There seems to be some important new factor in play here, some power we don't know about.
The letter written by the People's Assembly of Syria to British MPs. I've got it here, a copy of it, 4 pages. It makes a very interesting reading. Let me just give you a couple of the pull-out statements.
If we are pushed into the corner, we will defend ourselves, and such has been their language up to yesterday. Today, the change of language and change of tone may be built on some other unknown givens that are yet to be revealed.
Yes, an important factor, the presence of an Englishman from the British National Party helping these people to pitch their very sincere, genuine offer and bid for peace in a way that a handful of MEPs would get and understand and thereby turn the tide of history. Usually, politicians, British politicians, start wars. In Nick Griffin and the British National Party, you've got politicians who stopped a war.